All right. Hello, everyone. I see some participants joining us here. I give everyone just a couple minutes to come on into the room. Hopefully, we have a few more people coming in. Thanks for being here and making time on a Thursday night. All right. I am going to go ahead and run a poll so that we know who is joining us here today. For those of you who are joining us for not the first time, this is actually a different poll than you may have seen before. So please do take a moment to vote so that we have an idea of who's going to be here with us today and what kind of interests and preferences you have for your gap year experience. Got a few people voting. I'm going to leave that up for another 10 seconds or so as we have some people come into the room. Lots of interest in international programs here. That's great. All right, and I'll share those results so that everyone can see. It looks like we have primarily parents in this one. I'm not surprised that parents are the ones concerned with health and safety. And lots of programs here, both international and domestic options with some virtual interest as well. Great. All right, so let's get started. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Jessica Beatty. I'm the community manager as well as the Gap Year Fairs coordinator for Go Overseas and USA Gap Year Fairs. For the past 14 years, USA Gap Year Fairs has partnered with progressive high schools across the country to educate, inspire, and empower students to look beyond the classroom and pursue opportunities for experiential learning. As we adapt to these changing times, we've redesigned our in-person events to provide our community with inspiration and guidance through virtual events like these. A little bit about Go Overseas. You can kind of think of us like a Yelp, but for meaningful programs. Although we don't operate any overseas programs ourselves, we're here to help you connect with programs for high school abroad, study abroad, intern, volunteer work, and teach abroad experiences in addition to gap year programs. You can use Go Overseas to browse programs, read verified alumni reviews, and explore other resources such as scholarships. We actually have over $15,000 worth of gap year scholarships coming up next year, starting on February 1st as we kick off Gap Year Exploration Month. So I would encourage you all to join us and keep an eye on this page in order to get updates as we have scholarships rolling out next year. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat for anyone who's interested. We have a great panel coming up today. Great, thank you. We have Jason from J2 Guides, Matt from NOLS, Anne from Carpe Diem Education, Sophia from ARC, and Kyle from Seamester, who are here to talk to us about gapping during COVID and the health and safety procedures that they have in place during this time. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jason. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks so much, Jessica, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Soroyan, and I am one of the co-founders of J2 Guides, which is an accredited gap year counseling service here in the United States. My wife, Jane, and I have been gap year counselors for the last 10 years, and our whole goal and role in this field at this point in our careers is to help young adults identify whether or not they want to take gap time and whether that's the right path for them at this juncture in their life. And if so, help them then articulate what their goals are and match them with appropriate programs, internships, and volunteer experiences, as well as other opportunities all over the world. I feel really lucky to be here tonight. We have such a powerhouse group of panelists, and I promise not to take up too much of the time. I did want to share that many of the professionals in this field and many of the people on this call are lifetime professionals in this field. My wife, Jane, and I began as field instructors, moved into program direction, ultimately organizational direction before becoming gap year counselors. And many of the folks you're going to meet tonight have been involved within this field for most of their adult lives. We are full-time educators and very deeply dedicated to the transformative power of what we consider to be experiential ed or gap year in this particular case. We're all really committed to seeing you as young adults move through this stage from young adulthood into adulthood. And we think that these types of programs can really help facilitate that at this point in your life. I don't have a lot of time to get involved with what is a gap year tonight, but what I want to share is that for the intents of this evening's purposes, a gap year or gap time is really an intentional period of time that you're choosing as a young adult, say between 18 and 22, to get out of what is comfortable for you, get out in the world and learn and grow in a unique and hopefully really beneficial way. Gap time is not an end in of itself. It is really a vehicle to help you be successful in the next portion of your life. One of the things that we've seen in our field, particularly with COVID-19, is that there was a dramatic upheaval last spring or this past spring. And as every gap year program on this call knows, we had to, in very short order, evacuate every single one of our students and bring them home within a matter of sometimes 24 to 72 hours. So this spring moved very rapidly. And one of the things it showed all of us is that this field, which is highly dedicated to risk management, has been incredibly nimble with its practices, and we were able to move students home safely and very quickly. After the dust settled, we all convened, and we've been convening weekly, sometimes twice weekly, since mid-March to talk about how we move forward as a field with COVID-19 as a reality. On the screen, you'll see a number of the major changes that were created in order for programming to happen successfully this fall. And I want to point out just a few highlights, and these are generalizations. They don't bridge all the way across our fields, but much of what happened is that programs had to reduce the actual scope of their programming. So if programs were operating fully abroad and in many countries abroad, they may have limited it to one or two countries that was actually accepting Americans to go. If we were operating abroad and we felt that domestic programming might be actually a safer, more risk managed option for students, there were a lot more opportunities and catalog itineraries for students this fall to be here in the US. That's something we're going to see continue into the spring of 2021 as well as fall of this coming year as well. There were many other things that changed, as you can see on here, but I want to just detail and highlight, and I know my colleagues are going to do a great job of really getting into the nitty gritty of it, but a lot had to happen so that we could guarantee that students coming on program were COVID free and that they stayed COVID free, not just for their small community, but for the communities they were visiting. And again, my colleagues are going to detail how they did that and how they did that successfully this fall. Kelly, if you'll flip the slide. One of the things that I want to share that I think is really important is that we're talking tonight about facilitated gap year programs. These are dedicated programs that are bringing a group of young adults, sometimes as few as 8, sometimes as many as 30, together to go out and be involved in a particular environment or a particular skill set for this learning and this growth I've been talking about. There were 3 major program models that really thrived this fall. And I want to, again, just emphasize these are group-based programs. There are hundreds of other gap year activities you might get involved with, but the facilitation of these programs is what let them be so successful. Not only so successful in the student experience, but so successful in their risk management of COVID. So one of those models is an expeditionary model. Expeditionary means that you're essentially constantly on the move, generally referring to, but not always, being in a wilderness setting. And we've got a program representative, actually 2 really, if you think about it, 2 program representatives of that here tonight. That model was incredible because you brought together a group of students, and because you're way out in the wilds and you have very little input from outside influences and outside potential sources of COVID, they were able to keep their groups very healthy while in the field. The second model is residential programming. This means that you actually go to one place and generally spend most of your time there on that one piece of land or in that one region. We don't have any of those programs on this call, but this was another very successful model where students essentially came into a pod and they were able to stay safe within that pod because they could totally control outside people coming in. Everybody in the program was basically one big pod together and they didn't have a lot of outside influence. Finally, we have what could be called travel or travel immersion or travel immersion in service. And we have a representative, actually 2 on the program here tonight, and they're going to detail how they were able to be constantly on the go, meeting with lots and lots of different folks and still helping to keep their students keeping risk really low in terms of COVID. And Kelly, if you'll flip the slide, one of the things that we've seen is not only are students thriving, but cases of COVID all across all of these programs, as well as many of their colleagues in the field, were incredibly low. And the reason I want to share that with you is because there's a couple of things here. One, while students across the US are in college and either staying at home and taking classes remotely, or they're on their college campus but have very minimized activities in person, or they're actually taking all their classes virtually, all the programs you see represented here and many more had students together, unmasked, hugging, involved in close activities, learning, growing, and really thriving. And my wife, Jane, and I are currently traveling all around the country in a converted van, visiting gap year programs, championing the US gap year. And I can tell you, these gap year students are thriving. They are happier than they have been in 9 months. And that's what we keep hearing over and over and over. This is amazing. We're together. We're growing. How incredible. The second thing that's so amazing about that is that these groups actually, again, were really being resilient to COVID. And that's a big thing because that's not happening on college campuses as we've seen. And with everything that we're learning in the news, it's important to note next year, 2021, is likely very much to resemble what we saw in fall of 2020 in terms of how COVID is going to affect young adults, how it's going to affect these learning communities. And thus, gap year becomes a really viable option, particularly from a health and safety standpoint, but also just a compelling learning standpoint. I'm just going to finish with this last slide. This is something that Jane and I are very committed to as gap year counselors, and I know all of our program colleagues are as well. Health and safety really falls directly upon the student, and there's a few aspects to consider. One is education, and education is a really important thing. You as the student are the one who is responsible for educating yourself about what a program or an organization is doing. Programs are ready for these questions. They want you to ask them what their COVID policies are. They want you to ask them what happens if there's a positive COVID case on program. They want you to understand really clearly what's going to be expected of you in terms of behavior while you're on program. So educate yourself. All the resources that are out there, gap year counselors and program representatives want to help. Being transparent, being authentic, understanding yourself and what levels of risk you're willing to take on. This is a time to have a conversation as a family, young adult and parents or guardians, to look at each other and say, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is what we're not comfortable with. We need to find the compromise and the common ground so everyone can sleep at night. And then finally, for the young adults on this call, we really want to encourage you and emphasize you have to engage this, right? If your program is suggesting that mask wearing is going to happen for X number of days on program, you have to engage it so that you can be a part of this. If your program is saying that we're going to be doing tests beforehand and after, this is something you have to engage so that you can be an appropriate participant, someone who's actually creating a productive environment and a safe environment for everyone to be in. So I know that I'm coming up on my time. I just want to say that while the beginning of this year was frightening for all of us, particularly in our field, which is travel oriented, right? We're in the travel industry, if you will. What we've seen is that gap year students, because of gap year programs being essentially risk management ninjas, have been able to go out and be out in the world, both in this country and beyond, and actually engage in these really exciting learning opportunities. So if you're thinking about gap year and you're concerned about COVID, I can tell you right now that we've had 9 months of time of thinking about this and really considering it before you would launch in fall of 2021. These programs are doing a great job. They have this dialed in. I'm going to turn it over to Matt from NOLS, who's our first program representative. Thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Jason. Jason, that was a fantastic intro. I think he hit on a lot of major points in a shortened period of time. Normally we give them 15 minutes. We only gave them 10 minutes tonight. So that was kind of crazy. Jason, thank you again. NOLS is the National Outdoor Leadership School. We have been operating courses since 1965. For those of you quick at math, that's 55 years. This is our anniversary year. NOLS has been operational through COVID since July of this year. We pulled out courses in April due to COVID from all over the world. NOLS operates about 12 international locations and about 6 domestically. So We had a lot of students come out of the field. We took a hard look at what we can do as an organization to make it safe for our students to come back. NOLS teaches outdoor leadership skills, outdoor wilderness skills, environmental studies, risk management. And so when we were hit with this pandemic, NOLS decided that it was safest for everyone to come out of the field, just like Jason said. But we had our eyes set right on when can we get back out into the field, because we knew as an expedition style organization that we can operate these courses once we get them into the field without a lot of contact from the outside world, and that we could probably do it in a less risky fashion than going to college or attending some kind of university. So I'm going to hop right into it. If we could go to the next slide. NOLS knows the risks. Like I said, we've been operating courses in the backcountry in risky environments for the last 55 years. We are the true leader in wilderness education when it comes to these kinds of risks and risk management and risk assessment. So when our team looked at the COVID risks, we decided that there were enough things that we could do to make it safe enough for our students to come to us and experience these things that Jason was talking about, these in-person learning moments that we all really treasure as a group of people on this call tonight. NOLS practices thoughtful and effective risk management when containing COVID-19 or when thinking about COVID-19. This is just a new risk for us. We really didn't view this as like some earth-shattering or earth-defining moment. We decided that this was a risk that had risk factors that we could control for. And so enhancing the health and safety measures were really designed with the students in mind, the faculty in mind, and the staff in mind. So if we could go to the last slide here, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this slide. We've been operating courses, like I said, June timeframe, July timeframe of 2020. We put 15 sections of semester courses into the field this fall. We are going to be putting about 18 into the field this spring, including our first international location, which is our Baja, Mexico location, which we've operated since about the 1970s. We are requiring that everyone that comes to NOLS thinks of themselves as an asymptomatic carrier. And so we are requiring mask wearing, we are requiring physical distancing, we are doing daily health checks with thermometers, we are doing individual sleeping arrangements, hand washing stations within camps, and then we are limiting the amount of interactions that students would have had with the outside world, meaning that we are keeping them in the field longer and giving them more re-rations on the road so that they have less interactions with the outside world. And we continue to think that, like Jason said, this spring will look a lot like last spring. And we are prepared for accepting students into our program. We are full for this spring, but have a lot of options going out in the summer and fall of 2021. So if you have any questions, I'm about to drop my email and the COVID practices link for NOLS into the chat. I would love to hear from any and all of you about practices here at NOLS. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. My name is Anne. I'm the executive director here at Carpe Diem Education. We're based in Portland, Oregon. Really happy to be here tonight and in such great company. I actually did a NOLS semester on my gap semester, so awesome to follow up with you, Matt. So Carpe Diem offers semester and year-long programs for gap year students in 9 different locations around the world. Our programs focus on experiential education, community engagement, intercultural exchange, and personal growth and reflection. Our programs have up to 12 students per group, and there's always 2 leaders who we refer to as overseas educators on our programs. All of our programs offer optional college credit through our partnership with Portland State University as well. In addition to our 3-month gap semester programs, we also offer a year-long program called our Latitudes Year. This is a year-long experience for students, which allows them to combine a group semester in the fall and a focused volunteer placement in the spring. So this is a really cool opportunity for students who are looking for a full year where they can develop all of these international travel skills and be with a community in the fall, and then do something more independent in a different location for their second semester. Carpe Diem is deeply committed to access and equity in the gap year industry, and we have 2 different scholarships that are need-based for our students. Our programs are also eligible for federal financial aid, or FAFSA, and then we're always happy to arrange zero interest payment plans for our tuition as well. I also wanted to highlight that we have a nonprofit partner organization called Carpe Mundi, and they support low-income first-generation college students from the Portland area to travel abroad. And we donate over $160,000 a year to their work. Carpe Diem is also a B Corporation, which means we meet the highest standards for social and environmental impact. Next slide, please. So it's no surprise that COVID has forced all of us to stay flexible and be really dynamic over the past year. I think we're all pros at that, or as Jason says, ninjas. So during the spring 2020 semester, we evacuated 78 students from the field and continued providing virtual programming and support to these students and their families during the semester. This fall, we made the really intentional choice to keep our programming really small so that we could provide the best possible experience for our students and their families. And we had 1 group of students in the US borderlands in Southern Arizona this semester. I'm going to drop a link into the chat right now, or I will in just a minute. That is a video that our Borderlands group produced this semester. So I definitely recommend giving that a look if you want to see what our programs are like from a student perspective. So prior to the program, we developed COVID agreements that we had all of our students and families review, and that included pre-program health reporting, monitoring any symptoms, social distancing, masking, and other necessary precautions before joining our program. We also included expectations about our COVID protocols during the semester and at the end of the program when these students are returning home to their families and their communities. This fall, the vast majority of our programming was outdoors, which allowed for really great social distancing and very little exposure for our program partners. And in addition to taking these COVID precautions, we have a doctor and a mental health professional on call and available anytime if there is something that comes up. And we're very well resourced and connected in the communities where we run our programs. So we're able to be really flexible and dynamic and adjust itineraries as it becomes necessary, which in this day and age, that happens pretty frequently. Next slide. I also want to add that as an organization, we feel that it's incredibly important to consider the health of our partners and our host communities when operating in a time like this. So we placed a really huge emphasis on those relationships and keeping the health and possible exposure in front of mind when designing our programs for this fall and for this coming spring. So right now we are enrolling our spring and fall programs. Space is really limited for the spring, but we do have space in Costa Rica and the US borderlands and a wait list for the Hawaii program. And we're feeling really optimistic and excited about the fall. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis until programs are full. And we're prepared to make adjustments and we'll proactively communicate with all of our students and families if things do change. So feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have any questions about Carpe Diem. We're happy to talk about COVID or our programs anytime. Thanks.
All right, I'm Sophia. Hello, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm tuning in from Oregon as well. We're in Bend, Oregon. And I'm the Executive Director of Programs of GAP programs at ARCC. We've been around since 1983, formerly Adventures Rolling Cross Country. And we started out in a van with a trailer and a bunch of students piled in that van. And it's been really one of the silver linings of COVID is that we have returned to those roots with our GAP programs. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So it's been great to follow all of you, Jason, Matt, and Ann, and to hear a lot of overlap in everything that we've had to do here at ARC as NOLS and Carpe have had to do as well. We have been running programs, like I said, since 1983. Those are domestic and international programs. We have summer programs from 7th grade through 12th graders. We do custom programs, and then we have our GAP semesters, which traditionally have been overseas. This year, of course, with COVID, we had to bring home our students in the spring. We're able to safely bring them home in very uncertain circumstances, and then we're able to recalibrate and assess and see where things looked. We had a very, very small summer, but we're able to run programs this summer. We had a couple groups at the end of the summer, or about 4 or 5, and then we're able to turn around with our domestic programs and go back to our roots, like I said, with some domestic semesters, which I'll get into in just a moment. Our programs are 60 to 80-day semesters. They are project-based, so a lot of hands-on learning. They're very much experiential education. They are immersive, although this year cut back a little bit due to the need to be really mindful of our community partners and careful with health, of course. And they are adventure-filled as well. That's certainly a component and goes back to our roots as well, where we're really trying to develop the adventurous spirit, the leadership, the education, and kind of the cross-cultural awareness, even here in the United States. Each of our groups are a maximum of 13 students and with 2 instructors. And then we work very closely with in-country partners, either here in the US or overseas as well. So other adults on hand as well. The students are all between 17 and 20 years old, although a traditional student, and this year we've certainly seen it, is that gap year student who had plans to go to college this year in particular, delayed that due to COVID, of course. As Anne mentioned, we do also have financial aid available. For every student enrolls, we have a financial aid pot. It is need-based financial aid. We're very happy to provide more information about that and other opportunities for payment plans and so on. Also, we do have the opportunity for college credit. Most of our students don't go that route because they have deferred college, but that is an option for those who would like to move on with their college trajectory without delaying that while taking a gap year. We are also an accredited Gap Year Association member and happy recipients of a couple of awards from the Gap Year from Go Overseas, which I know a number of the other programs here are as well. So touching a little bit on COVID-19 and ARC, we were, as I mentioned earlier, and I know a few others on this program, I know NOLS mentioned already, we did run programs. We are one of the few organizations to run programs this summer. At the tail end of the summer, we ran some domestic programs close to home and got a lot of practice there. That then kicked us into our fall programming. We ran programs in Hawaii, the Northwest and the Southwest. We had 12 cohorts out this fall, and they were road trip style students in a van with a trailer, living in the outdoors, staying in single tents, having great adventures, doing a lot of the hands-on projects, really with the distancing and the respect around COVID very much at the forefront of that. As Jason mentioned, the reward was enormous in the ability to get students together and engaging and having fun and sitting around campfires and learning. And we are very much at a turning point here in the US. There's a lot going on. So it's been really thrilling to be able to host students in our own country and to give them opportunities to dive into a variety of really important topics right now where their other options are really virtual. So we're thrilled to be able to run our programs this fall. We've got about 10 students left, so we're almost all home and are really looking forward to getting them everyone home safely. Last slide, and I know I'm reaching the end. So for moving ahead, we are still enrolling students for the spring. We're going to have a couple international programs if all goes well. Right now, our partners are very eager to work with us, Central Caribbean and South America, and then we'll be returning to our tried and true domestic programs where we've been running programs for almost 40 years now in the United States. So are thrilled to be able to host these programs despite these tumultuous times.
All right, that's me. My name's Kyle. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I mean, I think the fact that we're not all in a gymnasium somewhere and we're doing this through Zoom is a testament as to why this is so important, and we're all so fortunate and thankful to be able to offer these programs confidently based on what everyone said, like real paths of success in being able to manage what has affected most of the globe. So I represent Seamester. We are a gap year voyage at sea, so 100% at sea, meaning that you'll be sleeping on a boat every single night of the program. In a nutshell, we have 3 boats. 2 of the boats are 112 feet. 1 boat is 88 feet long. So we're small cohorts of students and crew members. The 112-foot vessels have 24 students. The 88-foot vessel has 16 students. We offer 3 programs in the fall, we offer 3 programs in the spring, and then we offer a multitude of programs, shorter programs in the summer. Those fall and spring programs are 3-month academic semesters at sea. So those are our 90-day programs. We do have some 20, 40, 60, 6-day programs in the summer. What we do is like I said, we're an academic program at sea. So each one of our students, as well as being a full-time crew member aboard our vessels, meaning you're going to learn how to operate a traditionally rigged schooner, you're also going to school for 12 credits, right? So we believe, and we've always believed that we've always believed that we were remote learning. It's taken a bit of a twist this year. Our remote learning means that you're out in the world learning remotely from what is a traditional classroom. And that hasn't changed. As well as the academics, and we teach academics in what you're looking at every day. We try to teach by context. We're trying to teach you to learn by what you're looking at, what you're immersed in, and then you can take that on as a catalyst to your college experience to try to find what you're passionate with. But along with that, we vocationally teach scuba diving and sailing as real technical skills, licenses, certifications, so you can carry that on post college or in lieu of. As we'll get to the next slide here, we have some comprehensive COVID plans. In March, we had 2 programs operating in March when this all happened. One was coming from South Africa to the Caribbean, and one was in the Caribbean the whole time. We held on for a long time. It was pretty late in the game that we ended up having to suspend those 2 programs and send them home. Our students didn't want it. The parents didn't want to leave. But there was a Department of State Level 4 that really we felt it was the prudent move to get them back home. We were able to finish the academics from that new norm of remote learning. And then the summer played out as it was. We operate 2 much different high school summer programs called Action Quest and Go Beyond. We suspended those to summer of 2021. And then we also suspended a single Seamester program, and that was our 20-day program in June based on border closures in Antigua and the British Virgin Islands. But since that point, starting in July, we've been operating internationally with students. So I think we were all fortunate and it sounds like most of us were able to figure out this because risk is not new to any of us. We circumnavigated the globe 7 times just on one of our vessels. So the idea of risk is where we thrive. We see them as challenges, and then we pave the path forward. We did that this summer. We did that 3 programs this fall as well. They've all been international, and we've had 128 students. We still have 3 boats out there right now, but 128 students, which I think accounts to 8,200 individual student days, all of which have been COVID free, which we are extremely thankful for. And we have 3 more programs starting this spring, and then again in the summer and again in the fall. And the way that we're doing that and why we have those 128 students that have been COVID free is because of the risk mitigation policies and procedures that we've put in place. It's taken a lot of learning. It's been changing. It will change. Vaccines are a very big unknown as to how that's going to affect a lot of international travel. But we break our procedures down into 3 different kind of zones. The first being that we have to make sure that our students do not get to our vessel with COVID. That is the first thing. And amazingly enough, it's been an unbelievable opportunity for us to reinforce this idea of a cohort, of a group that's responsible for each other. That happens naturally on all of our programs, whether you're in the wilderness. With us, it's on a boat. You are crew members responsible for each other. So that starts 14 days before our program. When you're quarantining at home, you're looking at the most strict states and you're doing everything you can to minimize your risk of contracting COVID. Wearing masks, not seeing friends, not going out to grocery stores. And then before you travel, all of our students do take a PCR test within 48 hours of travel. You then jump on a plane, which is another opportunity. So we try to be as afraid of germs in any sense as possible when our students fly. We get to the boat, we have a whole hygiene procedure. And then we get on the boat and we go into this second stage, which is our quarantine. We are very lucky because we can get on a boat and build a moat around us, right? So our first 14 days of our programs have all included 14 days where we do not interact with the shore. Shore doesn't interact with us. Depending on the location, whether it's the Caribbean, Bali, South Africa, we try to get another test. But what we're doing is waiting out the incubation period for COVID. We're, as a team, we know that if someone comes down with COVID, it's going to be, pretty rampant among our boat. We have not gotten that because our students really buy into this idea that they're responsible for each other. And then we start our program. And as Jason was mentioning, we're hugging, we're doing a squeeze at night where we hold hands. We're living as if COVID doesn't exist again, which is, I'm personally extremely jealous because I'm doing a lot of my business like this and I'm not interacting with humans. But that quarantine starts for 14 days where they sail, they get to start diving, their academics begin. And then after that 14 days, we're good to go. Now, the remainder of the trip is limiting those opportunities. As everyone else mentioned, we're replacing a lot of real cultural intense, like the markets, the cultural activities with more natural activities as a byproduct of trying to limit getting COVID, a lot more hiking, scuba diving, surfing. But we are, we get to go from country to country, COVID free. And our students, like, again, it's a level of fortunate that I think our students recognize and we recognize as a company. The one thing that I will say, a lot's going to change. And before we get to the next slide, the last thing I will say is that students are also embracing the idea of being flexible. For all of us, we go to locations, but the locations aren't the program. It's the journey. It's what happens intrinsically amongst the students, the personal growth, the communication, the work ethic, just who you become as an individual in the program. And none of that has changed because of COVID. We might not go to some of the same itineraries because islands close, countries close, but we are the same program. This is the upcoming voyages. You guys can all make your way to our website. It's very easy to find. We do have 2 programs still available in the spring, and then everything else is pretty open. And we would love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you, Kyle. And thank you, everyone else. We will pull that contact information slide back up, but we want to make sure that we have time for questions. So we have a couple in the Q&A box now that we're going to answer first. But if you do have any pending questions, please go ahead and do submit that through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there. The first question that we have coming in here was way at the beginning of this, asking what are examples of companies or programs that have done residential programs. So I think that came in when NOLS was talking, but if anyone wants to weigh in on their residential programs as opposed to traveling programs, please feel free to elaborate. Maybe Jason, if you want to add.
Oh,
Sure.
I can chime in here. We don't run a residential program necessarily, but our Borderlands program is limited to just 2 different counties in Arizona, and the group is only changing locations maybe every 2 to 3 weeks or so. So it's a great program for students who maybe don't want to be moving every week or every couple of days, and to feel a little bit more settled in the experience. But Jason can speak to programs that are truly residential, I'm sure.
There have been a few different program models of residential opportunities here in the U.S. that we've seen do really well this fall. Some have been city-based. So one is called the Living City Project. Another is called Dynamy Internship Year. These programs have students living together in dormitory style or apartment style living while engaging in either virtual or in-person internships and activities. Another type of model could be represented by the Rising Earth Immersion, which is out of North Carolina, or Gap at Glenbrook, which are more wilderness outdoor farming based programming, where you are living on this piece of land, really getting to know the piece of land and engaging in issues of food justice, social justice, climate justice, and really connected again to this piece of land and often working with your hands in the outdoors. And finally, Visions, which is another very well-known program, had their Roots Montana program this fall, which was based in Montana in the greater Yellowstone region. And they were highly engaged on their land and everything from looking at hunting dynamics to how do you grow food in a climate that's constantly changing. So there's some really excellent residential programs as well out there.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. This last question that we have coming in, and I will do kind of a final call if anybody is waiting on submitting a question, now is your time to do so. The one that we do have pending asks, do you know the percent of individuals who did contract COVID throughout these gap year programs? So kind of a tough question, but that's what we're on this call to answer. So if anybody who feels comfortable to weigh in, please do so.
I'll start. NOLS, like I said, restarted in July timeframe, limited summer programming, went into fall. And as of today, the number is 0. So we are happy to report that no one has, as we are aware of, has contracted COVID-19 on a NOLS course. So good news. And I think hopefully a lot of the other programs will be able to say something similar, as we all took our look around and made some differences with our risk management policies.
I'm happy to jump in as well, as we were well on that track. And I will say we have had our first COVID case. It happened about a week ago. We've had about 180 students out in the past 4 months. And it came about a week ago. It was well into the program. It was at actually the very end of the program. And one student got it. He had very mild symptoms. We have a lot of systems in place that I have linked to in the conversation chain. But we immediately enacted the protocols. He was already staying in an individual tent. All of our students were in individual tents. We went back right to him, removed from the group, took the test, it came back positive, took another test, came back positive. Everybody else in the group took multiple tests as well, came back negative. So everyone else was fine. He then remained, our leaders were able to care for him remotely. So he was very much in his quarantine for the duration of the stipulation. So it's a 2-week quarantine. He was in a quarantine. His parents were well informed, were planning to come, but actually the situation was that our instructors, he could stay in his own isolation on the same ground, so our instructors could still care for him, and he was virtually tuning into a lot. He was asymptomatic after the first couple of days, and it was very mild symptoms, so he is completely fine. He was able to join the group afterwards. And the parents, it went very smoothly, and it gave us a lot of practice in an area that we've been preparing for the past 6, 7, 8 months. So we now have had our COVID case and hope not to have more moving forward, but we do feel confident now that all of our procedures were really well lined out to address that when it does arise.
All right, thank you, Sophia. Did Anne or Kyle want to tune in as well, or are we good to move on?
Yeah, we're fortunate. We have not had a COVID case as of yet. We continue to learn, as with everything. As long as we're flexible, students are flexible and are following the protocols and are being responsible to each other. And people know the risk. People know the risk. They know what they are going to get into, and they know how careful they have to be and what they have to do to get down here. So we just hope that continues.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in too. Similar to Sophia, we had been smooth sailing until just a couple days ago. Unfortunately, one of our leaders did receive a positive COVID test, and right now we're waiting on the results of their second test. They were tested with the whole group just as a routine precaution. No one was experiencing any symptoms or had any reason to believe that there would be any positive COVID tests coming up. That leader is now in isolation, and the group has returned to all of their social distancing, wearing masks, making sure that everyone is being extra cautious and following all of the COVID protocols that we put into place. Fortunately, we do have lots of extra support on the ground, so the group is doing well, and having this one leader in isolation isn't impacting the experience of the other students. And our hope is that the second test comes back negative, but we're prepared to adjust and move forward if not. And the leader is asymptomatic, so they're doing well not to.
Jessica, I just wanted to add, I've been the co-chair of the Standards and Accreditation Committee for the Gap Year Association for the last 5 years. And we are now developing a COVID-19 standards and protocol for program best practices based off of the fall and what has happened for programming. So we should have a lot more detailed information soon about kind of percentages of COVID contraction, as well as best practice suggestions moving forward, which is great news. Again, our field being very progressive and very responsive to what's going on.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you to all of our panelists as well. We even have a few nice comments in the Q&A box there with people saying that it looks like it's handled well, and it's great to hear. So really, really positive session tonight. Thank you all for being willing to be transparent with us and share your experiences so far. So we've pulled up here just the contact information. I know people have been dropping their information in the chat tonight, but if you did want to screenshot this or contact anyone after the event, you are of course welcome to do so. If you have opted in, you will be receiving information from them anyway, but of course, obviously feel free to reach out individually as well. We've also put together a list of resources for you. We would encourage you to use Go Overseas. Like we said, you can use Go Overseas to browse articles, explore programs, and read reviews. So we'd encourage you to start there, but there's lots of other information out there as well. We have just one more session this week. It's been a long week, and thank you all of you, especially those of you who have joined us for more than one session this week. I will say that our last program, I know a lot of you were looking for international programs, and we have programs represented in, I believe, England, Ireland, and Italy in our session tomorrow. So do feel free to join us for that as well, and we hope we'll see you there. Thank you to all of our panelists and all of our attendees. It's been a great week, and we really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.